Hi, everyone. This is Heather Hodges. I'm an organizational psychologist. Welcome to my show. This is the place where we say I'm in to creativity, bold thinking, transformational growth, and meaningful conversations. Today is the continuation of a series of podcasts on the Enneagram where I'll explore each of the 9 types, their wings, stress, and security numbers, how they might show up at work, their blind spots, and paths for growth. And today we're talking about Enneagram 6s. 6s are in the middle of the fear triad or the head triad, and they are in the dependent stance. And 6s are called questioners or the loyal skeptic, and they have the passion of fear and the desire to have security and support. And they are engaging and responsible and anxious and a little suspicious. And at their best, they are internally stable and they're self-reliant. They courageously champion themselves and others. And their basic fear is of being without support or guidance. And so their basic need is to feel certain and to feel secure. And so for them, the world is a slippery slope and people have hidden agendas. And so they walk around just full of apprehension about possible future events. So the key motivation for 6s is they want to have security and to feel supported by others and to have certitude and reassurance and to test the attitudes of others towards them and to fight against anxiety and insecurity. Now, Enneagram masters tell us that there are more 6s in the world than any other number. So half the world are 6s. And if that's true, they are the glue that holds all of us together. They're the people that keep the rest of us heading north. Because 6s are committed. They are security-oriented type. They are reliable and hardworking, and they're responsible and trustworthy. And they are excellent troubleshooters. They can foresee problems and foster cooperation, but they can also become defensive and evasive and anxious. And they run on stress while also complaining about stress. And they can be cautious and indecisive, but also reactive and defiant and rebellious. And they typically have problems with self-doubt and suspicion. Now, like the other numbers in the fear triad, 6s have a strong need for control. Now, remember, 5s manage their fear by gathering knowledge, and 6s manage their fear with worst case scenario planning. They think, what's the absolute worst thing that could happen? And then they make a plan for that. And then they have high security needs and they like order, and they like plans, and they like rules. And before hearing the Enneagram, 6s thought that everyone is as fearful as they are. And it's a real surprise for them to find out that we are not. Now, many 6s report that in childhood, they were unable to trust their environment for one reason or another. And as a result, they doubt themselves and they look to other people for courage and advice. And they want expert opinions about what they should do. Now, because of all of that doubt and suspicion and skepticism, 6s are more than willing to take a secondary position. Now, the talk style for 6s is group thought. And the guiding principle for 6s is this quest for security. So what 6s really want is predictability. And they doubt other people because they doubt themselves. Now, I think the devil's advocate position is really comfortable for 6s. And what they do with that devil's advocate position is they ask a lot of questions, and they often ask more questions than you might care to accommodate. But we have to remember that when a 6 is asking all of those questions, they're just trying to figure out what their role is. They aren't questioning you or your authority. They just want to know that someone has looked at the whole picture. And that really slows things down. And it doesn't mean that they don't trust you. It just means that they need to see things in context. And in relationships, 6s will wonder if they're really loved. And so they will check in with you just all the time. And they are very good team players. They want to do their part and they want you to do your part. And they identify with the underdog and they need lots and lots of consistencies. But 6s will procrastinate. And this is one of the best things I'm going to tell you about half the world. 6s procrastinate. And here's why. 6s believe that thinking about doing something is the same as doing it. So if you say to a 6, are you working on that project? And they say, yep, but they haven't actually done a thing, but they are thinking about it and they have a plan. So you have to be really good about asking follow-up questions if you want to really know where the project stands and what's going on with it. Okay, let's talk about wings. Your wings are on either side of your core number and everyone has access to both wings, but you may be overly reliant on one wing over the other, and your work is to grow both of your wings so that you can become balanced and mature. So 6s with a strong 5 wing are more introverted, more intellectual and cautious, self-controlled, and more prone to seek and find security with authority figures. And these 6s are sometimes misread as distant and aloof, but they just need to protect their privacy and they like to be alone and they like pursuing their own hobbies. And these 6s tend to ruminate too much, and this can lead to unproductive thinking and waiting too long to take action. Now, on the other side, 6s with that strong 7 wing, they are a delightful surprise. With a 7 wing, these 6s are entertaining and animated and adventurous, and they are more willing to take risks, albeit small risks. But the 6 with that strong 7 wing, they're still a 6, so they will have to have a backup plan for just about everything. But these 6s are more extroverted and willing to sacrifice themselves for loved ones. Okay, what about stress and security and growth? What do those arrows mean? So when 6s are in stress, they can become competitive and arrogant at 3. And they can become workaholics and pursue material success. And they can also hoard resources to make themselves feel more secure. And in this space, the 6 is more likely to project an image of competency, usually to fend off their own anxiety and give others the impression that they have it all together. However, when moving towards growth and security, these fearful, pessimistic 6s become more relaxed and optimistic like healthy 9s. And so in this space, they are less likely to get worked up about potential threats in their environment. And so under the influences of that 9 energy, 6s stop planning for disasters and they feel less anxious about life in general. They are more lighthearted and flexible and empathetic and more likely to trust their own gut than rely on authority figures. And so they know that every little thing is just going to be all right. Now, what about at work? 6s are sharp. They are analytically minded troubleshooters. They love being on an underdog team, resurrecting a company or a project that others said couldn't be done. And 6s are more concerned about the common good than any other number on the Enneagram. And this is true at work too. They are loyal and they won't leave the organization over minor conflicts, and they don't like to move from group to group in the organization. They like to do their part and they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And at work, there are lots of things we can learn from 6s. Now, most of us move too fast and can make decisions on the fly. And if you have a 6 on your team, let them play the devil's advocate. You'll find they can bring you some clarity and scenarios you may have never thought of. Now, I think every business or team needs a loyal skeptic who is willing to ask hard questions or point out the flaws in a plan. But you also need to know that if you have a 6 on your team, they will ask a lot of questions, not because they are opposing you necessarily, but because they are trying to figure out what they are supposed to do. And they also want to be sure someone has looked at the big picture and the implications for the whole team. Now, sometimes it feels like it takes a long time for the 6 to think through all of their questions and to verbally process the scenario. So it's a good idea if you are leading a 6 or if you have a 6 on your team and you have called a meeting, it's a good idea to publish your meeting agenda ahead of time to give the 6 time to think through all of those questions. But it might also be helpful if you ask them to bring just their top 3 or 4 questions instead of their full list of 20 questions. Now, 6s don't like highly competitive environments. They don't like to be pitted against their colleagues. Now, remember earlier I said that 6s have a tendency to believe that thinking about something is the same as doing it. This is never more true and never more aware or problematic than in the workplace. So be sure to ask lots of follow-up questions if you really want to know where a 6 is on a project. Now, because 6s are so loyal, they can sometimes take on too much work, and this can leave them feeling stressed and resentful, and then they can overreact and freak everyone out. And when you see this happening, get them to delegate some of their work, or at the very least, break it down into manageable pieces. If you love a 6 or if you work with a 6, they need to hear that they are safe. All right, let's talk about blind spots. 6s are incredibly loyal and responsible and great at seeing what could go wrong before it happens. But those same strengths can also create blind spots. 6s sometimes overestimate threat and risk and see danger where none exists. And what feels like realism might actually be anxiety in disguise. They also tend to doubt their own inner guidance and look for reassurance instead of trusting their instincts. And because they want to make the right choice, 6s can overthink and second guess and then get stuck in analysis paralysis. And when fear ramps up, they may project doubt onto others, assuming people can't be trusted when it's really their own anxiety speaking. And they also underestimate their own courage and not realize that showing up in spite of fear is where true bravery lies. Ultimately, the 6's growth lies in learning to trust themselves, to take action even when the path isn't certain, and to remember that safety and courage they're searching for already exists inside of them. All right, 6s, here are a few tips for growth and development in your life and leadership. First, address your authority issues. Examine your history with authority figures and previous bosses, especially those with whom you had a negative reaction, and glean lessons from those relationships and try to learn from past experiences. And second, learn to manage your anxiety. Try not to fuel your anxiety with worst-case scenario planning. Anticipate your anxiety reflexes and learn the early warning signs and work to de-escalate your fearful thinking. And finally, since you usually look at the world through the lens of what could go wrong, pivot your focus to what could go right. Shift your attention to the glass half full instead of half empty, and trust your own judgment and authority. You'll give another person excellent advice and then seek outside expertise for yourself on the same subject. You can trust yourself and trust that your expertise is often superior to others. We need you, 6s. Well, there you have it. Enneagram 6s. This is part of a series of episodes where I'm exploring each of the 9 Enneagram types. And if you missed the other episodes on the Enneagram, please go back and take a listen. And thank you for joining me in this conversation. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review and a comment, and share it with somebody who could use a dose of creativity and inspiration. So until next time, keep saying I'm in to creativity, bold thinking, transformational growth, and meaningful conversations. May you be wildly creative in your life and leadership. I'll see you soon.